Hi, I'm Christina Southam with the BYU Management Society, and I'm excited to welcome you here today. For those of you who aren't familiar, the BYU Management Society has a mission to grow moral and ethical leadership around the world. We have 80 plus chapters, 40 domestic and 40 international, and it is a fantastic audience. We have people tuning in from Colombia and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, Brazil, so we have an exciting group to be with here today. If you want to, in the Q&A, you can go and chat in where you're coming from and who you are, tell us about yourselves. And one of our most exciting guests today is Steve Young. We thank you for your patience. Yesterday we had to reschedule, but he is here and we're ready to go. He doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'd love to tell you a little bit about Steve. He's the chairman of the board of 5 HGGC portfolio companies, Pro Football Hall of Famer, and founder and chair of the Forever Young Foundation. Steve, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm sorry about yesterday, everybody. That was, I'll blame it on Microsoft and Bill Gates. That's all I can say. I'm not gonna lie. We were struggling. I was on I don't know if you noticed in the chat, but I was on as I could only log on as anonymous. I don't, whatever, long story, but I kept writing, I'm here, like Horton Hears a Who, and you're like, I am here, do you hear me? So I apologize for those that waited yesterday. Anyway, we're here, and this is exciting for me. I have a long history with BYU Management Society. I think I've spoken over the years a number of times, and each time I really do appreciate it. I know there's regionals and even locals, and so this is fun, but this is a great way, amazing way to communicate. I found in the last couple of months, honestly, even Zoom Church, I found the speeches we've had it here in our ward. It's more intimate, right? People are at home, they're comfortable, and they speak, and I just feel like there's just more authenticity in a strange way. So there's silver linings to this horrible situation that we're in, and so I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have people maybe from all over the world. Who knows how the far reaches of BYU Management Society, but I'm grateful. I sent out, or Christina sent out yesterday, a little teaser. David Brooks, who is a New York Times columnist, and he spoke at BYU, and also in BYU Magazine in January, they did a little synopsis of his speech, and it really hit me, because I've been thinking about the convergence in my life around business and professional life and family and the overarching theologies that influence all of those things. And people are always asking me, Steve, what are the similarities between sports, your previous life, and your time now in private equity? And I found that the whole thing has just mashed together. There are differences, but I would say the same thing in my marriage or with raising kids, or they're all relationships that have the same rootedness and the needs for leadership and for what that really means. And what I thought early on, I remember when I was replacing Joe Montana, my first instinct was I wanted to be Joe Montana. That was how do you lead? I need to be like, I'm going to be Joe Montana, because that clearly works. And it took me a little while, and that might feel very childish of a response, but it was, kind of common sense to me that, like, I found myself wanting to walk like him and throw like him and do everything like him, because if I did, it would all be fine. And that was why it was such a need. And so as I raced around trying to do that, I found that I had, the diminishing returns. The harder I tried, the more I focused, the more I was intense on doing this. And I mean intense. I mean, there was no time off. I was single at the time, and I was laser focused on doing this, and that's all I care. And think about the return and the feedback loop. The feedback loop was was always, it was not long because I would hear on the radio, or I'd get in the car and easy listening station, and Barry Manilow would quit singing, and then all of a sudden the guy would come on and go, well, Steve Young is not Joe Montana. I was like, well, that is not working. And or I'd be in the grocery store and I'd be checking out, and the clerk was going through all the person in front of me, and they'd enter a conversation. Inevitably, that conversation was, oh, well, how about Steve Young? He's no Joe Montana. I mean, you think I'm joking. It was like always. It was everywhere. And so I realized, my gosh, I got into a depression in this effort to try to replace him and be him. I became depressed. I went into a hole of anxiety, and I remember there were mornings when you go to bed and you just know that you're just glad that the day's over, and then the first crack of light at like 5:04, and your body just wakes up, and you've got that dread and the sense of like, I can't do it another day. How am I going to go to work? And then you just lay there for a while, and you got that sick stomach feeling. I mean, this is going on for weeks, I won't say months because the football season is not that long, but to me, and then the dread became resentment. I resented the rest of the team because they certainly weren't as focused and the effort that they had to try to help me achieve this goal. They clearly were underinvested. I was overinvested, clearly. They were underinvested. And so I built up resentment, and how this is lousy, and this is not fair. This is people are not treating me right. I mean, they're not even looking at it the right way. In the media, the writers, the beat writers for the 49ers were writing stories. I'm like, that's not even true. That can't be you guys should talk. They don't have the right context. I mean, it was just, the whole thing had kind of collapsed on me as I was trying to achieve this great thing. And I'm sorry if you've heard this story before, but it gives context for how we're going to get to the article, and we're going to get to my main point in time. But I just want to share this quick anecdote. So we go down to play the Los Angeles Raiders at the time. They were in the Coliseum in LA, and we got beat like 10 to 7 or something like that. It was a terrible game. And I remember the last play of the game, to win the game, to have a chance to win it, I'm scrambling, and Jerry Rice is open in the end zone. I know this later because you can see the film, and he's wide open. And I'm scrambling around, and you think about everything about who I am at that moment, the desire I have to see Jerry Rice open in the end zone to win this game. What would that mean for me? And I don't see him. Scrambling around, kind of overwrought, and I'm desperate, I don't see him. And the game ends, I get sacked, and the game ends, and everybody goes into the locker room, and it's kind of the low point. When now my own teammates, you could feel them like, this is not working, where's Joe? I mean, it was just, I hope I can give you the proper context, because it just felt like the whole world, because it really was everyone in my world, everyone I worked with, everyone in the media, the newspapers, on the radio, and at the grocery store, everywhere I went, it was the same thing. So it felt like it was just squeezing down on me. So that Tuesday was a day off. That's the NFL's day off for players. And that Monday night, I flew took a Delta flight back to Salt Lake just to get, to me, that was home, safe. I just need to get away for a minute and try to, I went to see my brother who was at the University of Utah Medical School at the time, and just walked around downtown Salt Lake, kind of just basically lamenting all the things I just told you, and, with more emotion. And I remember him telling me, well, Steve, I mean, you're getting paid $1 million and, playing football. It seems like it would be a lot of fun. And I've got 3 kids and I'm broke, and I'm trying to go to med school. And so it's funny that I couldn't even hear his needs. My needs were way bigger than his needs or what he was going through. And I remember thinking, well, Mike, you don't have an idea. I'm not even going to make it to Christmas. I'm gonna collapse. And so I got back on the plane to go back, and I sat next to Steve Covey. And I'd known of Steve Covey. He was from Provo, and I'd seen his kids and known his kids well. I'd been around him, but I never really got a chance to, meet him and talk to him. And there he was, and he said simple. He goes, "How you doing?" And for the next, half an hour, 45 minutes, I just unloaded all of this on him. Every detail that I could come up with, how disastrous and terrible this situation was. He listened, which is one of his real talents. And at the end, he said, "Man, Steve, that's a lot. Man, I feel that. I can feel where you are right now. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" And I said, "Yeah, no, it's fine." He goes, "Your owner, Eddie DeBartolo, I've heard that he's quite a innovative owner." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, he's the first owner who saw players as partners. And that's unheard of. We were chattel. Everyone in the NFL saw us as chattel. I mean, that was just how it worked. And Eddie saw us as family. And it just changed the dynamic and changed the way we felt and changed the dynamic of sports in the future because of him, the owners now see and recognize, and those that build partnership, have a real leg up. And you look at the championship teams in the recent years, they're all owners that have developed relationships and partnerships with their players. And he says, "Yeah, I heard that. I'd really like to meet him one day. He's a really interesting man." He goes, "What about Bill Walsh, your coach? What, tell me about him." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Bill, he's so innovative in his offense and how he looks at the players, and we are very holistically, their health, their mental health, their marriages. Do they need help at home? How do we eat? How do we sleep? How do we travel? How do we, really just at that time, just complete innovations." And he says, "Yeah, I've heard him. I'd really like to meet him too. He seems like a really interesting guy." And then Joe Montana, he's on the team, right? And at that time, Joe was hurt, and that's why I was playing. And he was actually on the team and on the sidelines. And he said, "He's on the team, right?" And I go, "Well, yeah, Stephen, that's the problem. I mean, that's the whole issue." And he goes, "Well, if you needed as a mentor to go talk to him and ask him questions, could you ask him as a mentor?" And I said, yeah, he would do that. And he said, "Huh, interesting. Steve, I travel the world looking for platforms, companies, now families, organizations, wherever I see them, government agencies, anywhere where someone has built a platform that allows the human beings on that platform iterative possibilities to go see how good they can get. And then those qualities that make that happen, I try to amplify, because to me, that's what the life is about. It's about iterative opportunities to see how good you can get. And that's all we want as human beings. We seek it. We seek iterative chances to get better. And you can see in a gospel setting how that would be too. And so and he said, I got to tell you, as I've traveled the world, listening to your story, I don't know of anyone that I've ever met that is in a better place and a better platform to go see how good he can be." And I remember that feeling. It was probably over Elko at the time. I'm like, whoa, the whole world just shifted. And I remember my life just changed right there. And if you know Stephen Covey, he was bald and kind of, I'm not going to say he looked like Yoda, but he put his finger up kind of like Yoda, and he looked me in the eye. He said, "Steve, this is difficult because not everybody seeks this, but do you want to see how good you can get? Because it's hard. You might find out you're not as good right now as you want to be, but do you want to?" And I remember looking him in the eye back and saying, "Yes, I want that." Then he says, "Then you are one of the luckiest men I know." So I landed, and I remember racing down to work the next day, praying that I haven't lost my job because of my attitude, because of my dismal performance, because of my, blame game that I had going, and the depression and everything else that was going on. And all it was perspective. It was the ability to see a new way with a more broader, deeper perspective, a proper perspective. And I'm so grateful for that. And it really changed my professional life. It changed my career, and really in many ways led me to see leadership and achievement on a quest. And that's what he talked about. It's a quest to see how good you could get. And I remember the next year we played the Dallas Cowboys and Troy Aikman, and he was he was, they were the big dogs, and he was warming up, and I went racing over to Troy Aikman, and as they were warming up, and it was a little unusual to do this. I raced over to, and you go over and shake hands and say good game, whatever. And I said, Troy, I'm so glad you're here. I'm on a quest to see how good I can get. I can only fight out against the best, and you guys are the best, and I'm so grateful you're here. And I remember Troy looking at me like, you're weird, what's your problem? But that's, I really did take that on, and it's been an incredible journey of self-discovery and recognizing how unsegmented my life is. I leave it. I want a second anecdote, and I'm so sorry if you guys have heard these before, because I don't know where I've said them. I don't know that I put them all in one place, but I apologize if you've heard any of this before. But I think we have a different context where, if you have. But Reggie White was one of the great football players of all time. He was 6'7", made 350 pounds, but he ran like he was, 5'11", 170. He was an incredible athlete. He was built to be 6'7", 375. Did I say 360 or 375? Who cares at that point? I mean, his football, he might have been 400. I don't know. He felt like that. But anytime you played Reggie, it was a visceral experience, because you'd go drop back a pass and he was coming to get you, and you could hear him. He was like a loud, and you could hear him coming. And it was like a train. You're like, oh, here comes Reggie. Oh, let me get rid of the ball. And a lot of times I didn't. And whenever Reggie would get to me, he's just this huge human. He would take me and just envelop me and then he would roll over and then let me fall on top of him to make sure that I didn't get hurt. And then, because we were friends back in the day, he'd be like, Steve, how are you doing? And I'd be like, Reggie, not so good. Well, how's things going? How are things at home? How are your folks? He knew my dad. And I'm like, Reggie, let's talk after the game. We don't want to talk right now, right? And a few plays later, he'd come in. He's like, so anyway, are you staying? Do you stay here in the off season? I'm like, Reggie, please, I can't, no more, And I've always been amazed, because that in the adrenaline-filled environment that he was in, the physical challenge, the emotional, mental challenge of playing professional football in front of 80,000 people, most, if not all, human beings react to the environment. They become a part of the environment. That's how that's how they find success. Where Reggie could be part of it, have the same adrenaline, the same intensity, the same competitiveness, but then when it was a flash of a change, he was your friend and could find common ground. And with that perspective, with those couple of anecdotes, I really want to launch off into where I am today in how things have come together. You guys, I don't know if you got a chance to read the BYU Magazine or listen to David Brooks, but he titled. It was funny, the subtitle. I don't know if you where is the, oh boy, Steve Live. That's not good. We should taped it, Christina. That's the problem. I'm looking for the title. Oh boy, it's the best. Bear with me. How he titled his speech, and at BYU, and oh, here it is. The merger of self, forgetting where you end and something else begins, can take you beyond happiness to joy. Someone who's not LDS, he's basically, in my mind, described charity and described a sense of a non-transactional life. Most of my life I've spent in a transactional world. Even in my spiritual life was very transactional. And I liken it to the law of Moses, because the law of Moses was transactional, right? It was meant to be foundational, important. It wasn't bad, it wasn't wrong. It was foundational. It was a preparatory, right? And the preparatory part of it was transactional. I'm going to do something for a good reason, and I'm doing it for a return compensation. You know, I'm going to be obedient, or I'm going to be righteous, and I'm going to get God's love, or I'm going to get celestial life, or I'm going to get, I'm transactional, right? That's what I'm about. I liken it to Boy Scout theology. Like, the Boy Scout is an amazing, important, good thing. But think about it. I'm doing all these things to receive awards so I can wear them on my chest, and you can see how well I've done. It's very clear, my worthiness to be a Boy Scout. And the goal is to get so worthy that I have an Eagle Scout, and I have a ceremony, and now I'm an Eagle Scout, and then I'm going to use that Eagle Scout to put on my resume and tell everybody, because I want them to know how accomplished I am. And so there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing, but it's still transactional. And so most of my relationships, most of my experience as a professional football player, and then early on into my career in private equity was really transactional. It's like, I'm going to work hard. I mean, hard. I'm going to be thoughtful. I'm going to look to lead, and I'm going to, but I'm going to do it in a transactional mindset to achieve. And that's what, it's interesting. That's what David Brooks talks about as a meritocracy. And let me just. He starts I have the BYU Magazine piece, so it's a little bit of a melted down. But he says, when you walk through the career side of life, you walk with a certain set of values. We take kids who start with the intensity of life and feed them into the college admissions process, which teaches them that status and achievement are at the core of life. Then they get out and lead the kind of life that I led, which is a life of meritocracy, trying to make it, trying to achieve, trying to contribute, trying to build up an identity. And these are not bad things. There's no ill there. But there's a transactional experience, which is not the fulfillment of the full measure as humans. And so the meritocracy does give us a lot of achievement. There are things in the meritocracy, pieces, that if you take unadulterated, like expand them too far, with no other moral system, are actually lies. The first lie of the meritocracy is that career success makes you happy. I am the poster child for that not being true. The second lie of the meritocracy is the lie of self-sufficiency, that you can make yourself happy. That if you can win one more victory, lose 15 pounds, replace Joe Montana, or even be Joe Montana, I can be happy. I can achieve. The third lie is that life is an individual journey. We buy kids this book called Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. In that book, there is an individual kid, graduated from college, and his life is a series of experiences on the way to success. He has no friends, he has no relationship, he has no connections, because we think of life as an individual journey. And even theologically, we can, if you're not careful, it can be an individual journey of salvation. I'm working out my own. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. I love you. Good luck to everybody. I have to go do this. And there's truth in it. It's not untrue. But it's really how you get there. And if you're not careful, you fall into a really deep, sure connectedness to meritocracy, to transactional relationships. And transactional relationships at its core, at its foundation, is self-focused. If you think about the law of Moses, if you kind of see the connected part of that, when Christ came, the law of Moses had rotted because of its self-focus, right? It was a series of things that you needed to do to remind you of the coming of the Savior. These are good things. But because they were self-focused over generations, it became just things to do. It was things to get accomplished so that I could show my love for a good cause, right? But it became just, at the time of Christ, if a woman did not put the shoes outside the door in the right order, she could be divorced because they needed to be in the right place. Think about the steps that needed to be taken, literally steps that needed to be taken on certain times and certain days. How everything had to have a certain prescriptive life. It was so prescriptive that Christ said that these people, these righteous people, were the worst of all because they become so prescriptive that they lost the principle. The principle was gone. It was lost to them to the point that they couldn't even see the living Savior in front of them because it was so prescriptive. And it becomes such a deep embedded part of their life. And so I look at our life as a Latter-day Saints and our sense of achievement. And because of our Boy Scout, Boy Scouts aren't a part of the church anymore, but for generations, it was embedded. And it's a good thing. Please don't get me wrong. This is good. But because it was so transactional, that if taken to its end, becomes so prescriptive that there's a road there of self-interest that in its end has to rot. And I think that's Christ's point. It's like we will rot if we are self-focused, even for the right reasons. And I think in the same way that David Brooks is saying that meritocracy, self-focus, or transactional relationship, they will fail as well over time, even though there's much good to be done, much to achieve, much to do. And I think that what we need to focus on is graduating in many ways to a non-transactional thinking, doing relationship. Non-transactional relationship. I'm going to use Mother Teresa as a great example to me. In the slums of Calcutta, and everything I can read about her, I see no transaction. I see someone who got up and every day of her life, especially the end of her life, was out to see healing of these poor people. That was how whatever she was receiving back was received through that effort. Felt like it was singular. That's all I care about is their healing. It was not self-focused at all. It was just about those, my relationships, because all you can do is affect the people you know or see or have a relationship with, even a virtual one. If you think about the scripture when God says, my work and my glory is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. I say to myself, where's the transaction? And I don't see a transaction. I see God's only purpose is our healing and success. Because we now know from a restored gospel perspective that we were together as a human family before in a spirit, as spirits, children of our heavenly parents. And that their love for us began this process, an educative round in mortality. So that's what we're about. And so we know that one of the ultimate goals of this educative round is to see, remember Moroni 7, to see as God sees. And I'm assuming love as God loves. And so people ask me in a business context or in a family context or my previous life in sports, there's no context that this doesn't become true. And so as we think about a non-transactional relationship, it's subtle. The differences are subtle, but it's like anything. A ship that leaves port in different directions, 4 days away, they're going to be a long ways away from each other. And so although a subtle change in trajectory leaving port, a couple of degrees difference, clearly over time, can put you in a much different place. And so at my time in my life today, after all my lessons and learnings, the thing that has really resonated through these experiences and why this article and why this speech really resonated with me is that I was about achievement and for good reason. But I'm not sure that's the end result that I want. And the only way to change that trajectory is to become other focused. And once you think about life that way and you see what the Savior said is, if you just think about the different, lose yourself and find yourself. What does that mean? It means that I want you to enter into a non-transactional space where you do not seek. In fact, I think Christ's main message was, by losing yourself, you'll actually receive what you're looking for. You actually, the achievement that your transactional life, your world that you've been seeking, clawing at and doing and working at and the things that you're looking to receive in that transactional space, if you really want those things and a staying force, a perpetual force, I'll say a Zion, we think about Zion as a place of perpetual joy, perpetual. The only way you can think about that is not self-focused, right? The only place where Zion can be is in a non-transactional space. And we'd have to have a group of human beings that's how they lived, because that's the only way that we can. It's not perpetual otherwise, because the second it becomes self-focused and self-achieving as a focus, it will end up rotting over a period of time. If that's unadulterated, to David Brooks' point. And so for me, trying to see those subtle differences in how I see the world and how I see my fellow human beings, and trying to think about if I'm going to seek to live in a non-transactional space, how do I do it? And I'm led to a number of spaces. This shows up, especially in section 121 of the Doctrine and Covenants. It talks about 4 qualities that are the qualities that we should seek in mortality to be like God. I mean, they talk about it in terms of the priesthood, but really, if you think about the priesthood, it's like to act in God's name, to be a part of how he and she sees all of us in eternity. And so the only way, the 4 qualities are, what are they? We know them by, you should generally know them by heart. Gentle persuasion, right? Meekness, long suffering, and love. And so I thought to myself, because I've had some really challenging emotional times especially over since I retired. My life is not as set. You leave the NFL life, and that was a very set life, challenging, all encompassing, but getting married, starting my family, starting a new career, being out in the world, generally more sense of it than just being cloistered to be, behind the walls of the NFL. The challenges, I've seen some amazing challenges in my life where I thought to myself, how do I even do this? How do I attack this? How do I even try to start accomplishing it? And it came to me as I thought about it, live your religion. That's how you do it. Live your religion. And what is that? And it came as these 4 qualities, like lay long suffering over this situation. Lay meekness over this situation. Lay gentle persuasion over this situation. Then how would you act if you were going to be gentle persuasion? If you were going to be long suffering, how would I act in this situation? And what happened is, as I did those things, I found myself leaving a transactional kind of mindset to a non-transactional mindset, and really focused on the other person in the relationship, the other part of the conflict. And suddenly ideas came to my mind on what to do. It was as if it was the gate to kind of more enlightenment. And I've kind of tried to practice this in business settings. I mean, we're a middle market private equity firm. We're $1.5 billion in a fund, and we're buying companies for hundreds of millions of dollars, and the negotiations are significant. And I thought to myself, of all the odd places to try this, what if we did it in one of these heated negotiations? And the more I did it, the more success I had. It was crazy. But all of a sudden, I wasn't looking for the last dollar, because I was not looking for what I could get. And it, you know, that old saying that no one remembers what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And that's essentially the rootedness of what David Brooks was saying. What I'm trying to describe to you is, in the quest for the healing of every relationship that you have, is how you receive, and how you can receive into perpetuity, because it's not self-focused. And I've noticed that even in the highest echelons of society or intellectual capacity or professional world, or the complexity of the many things that I've seen, I'm enjoying practicing and living my religion, and it has given me look at me. I don't know. It's given me things that I wasn't looking for. And they are all wonderful, I guess I should say. And I can say that I can see the same impact in my professional world, in my parenting of children, in my marriage, in my relationship with my broader families, out on the street, day to day. And so I leave, and I'll open up for questions if you want, if we have a few minutes, but for me, it is, if you think about every relationship that you have in your life, and a relationship could be out in the car, driving on the highway, and someone cuts you off. You're now in a relationship, right? How do I lay long-suffering, gentle persuasion, meekness, and love unfeigned on that relationship? And why would that be important? Because that relationship, as we've seen, can end horrifically. We've seen where those kind of relationships turn into battles on the side of the road to where someone gets shot. I mean, you hear about those stories. And in that relationship, in that moment, as you're now called to like live your religion, how do I do that? How do I act, and why? Why in that moment? Because that moment has the beginnings of disaster. And if you think about any relationship you have, has the potential for, it can be celestialized, it can be perpetual joy, or it could be disastrous and death. I mean, relationships can go different directions. And what is Christ saying? I want to be in the middle of your relationships. I did what I did so that I could be in the middle. I want to be there, but I cannot be there unless I'm invited in by some party. And if I'm going to live my religion in every relationship I have to invite that in. The atonement has to be a part of the relationship so that it can heal. I don't heal it. Christ heals it. But I present I create a space for it to happen. And that doesn't mean that it happens at that moment. It doesn't mean that it happens at all. People can live in resentment and anger and frustration and have that against you for your whole life. And you try your best to live your religion, nothing happens. But the space has been made. The opening has been done. You know, the work is ongoing too. This is an ongoing work because you're not seeking anything. And I don't want anything for this. This is not transactional. I just want healing. I want better relationships because I want that healing for you. And the crazy thing is I seek healing for others. The crazy thing, I'm healed. I don't. It's exactly as the Savior said. It's a nutty thing. And so, if you read Moroni 7 and you read Moroni just desperately trying to leave with you the last things of his life, the last thing that he could, like, what would I leave you if I could leave you anything? He's leaving you this. I'm so grateful for it. It has been I mean, look, I know that church history can be a muddled mess. I know that, I get all that. But Moroni 7 is a stake in the ground that is immovable. Moroni 7 is, to me, the truth. And it really is a reflection of this quest for others' healing. And Moroni called it charity, or seeing transfigured eyes other humans. And it is a completely non-transactional experience. If you think about the church the last few years, certainly working to become more principle-based than prescriptive. And you can see that in what's happened in ministering. You've seen that in the missionary effort. So much more of it becoming more principle-based. Liking it to Joseph Smith's great quote, teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. And that it's messier, but the principle-based expression is going to lead you to more of a non-transactional experience. If you recall when President Holland, President Holland, because he was the president of BYU when I was there, but remember when President Nelson spoke April of 19, I want to say, maybe it's 8. Anyway, they introduced ministering. Has it been that long, 18? And President Nelson stood up and said, I wanted to introduce a new program that will ask us to do higher and holier work. And then he introduced Elder Holland, and he stood up and described this higher holier work as ministry, and that we would no longer be in a transactional relationship in home teaching. We were going to do it as a principle base, and we were going to do it in a way that he described as the law of love. And the law of love is a non-transactional love for other humans that if you practice, that's how you receive. And so you can go back and read those speeches. There's a few gems in there that I think will give you more clues to how to kind of ingest all of this. But for me, as BYU Management Society, and Christina asked me, do you want to talk? I'm like, what do I have to say? I guess I can just share with you my own kind of experience, what I do, what I'm trying to do every day, and what I've learned. And when I saw this article from David Brooks and what his speech at BYU, it just super resonated. And I can just quickly, he described the meritocracy, that the fourth lie is that you create your own truth. And you think about the Sadducees and Pharisees, that's what had happened. They created their own truth because it had brought it in transaction, if that makes sense. And then he talked about weavers, and I really encourage you to go read this or watch it. He talked about weavers who instinctively saw someone other and instinctively sought to be a part of their life and to see them more deeply. And in seeing them more deeply, that's where David Brooks started to find his greatest joy from happiness. And that he found the quest that meritocracy had taken him all this time, and he wasn't finding he wasn't finding that sense of accomplishment that he was looking for, that sense of satisfaction or the joy that he was described that he was looking for. But when he saw these weavers that actually instinctively were out to heal others without transaction, that's where he found for him this really heightened sense of spiritual connection. And so I leave you that. Honestly, I didn't prepare this. I had it in my head and I didn't know how it'd go, and I don't know how it's gone. I just talked. So I want to, Christina, do we have a few minutes for a couple questions, or do you have a couple that you've collected on the chat?
Steve, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, it sounds like there's a little bit of an echo, so I hopefully that doesn't come through. But thank you so much, and lots of wonderful comments coming in from people, and and thanking you for your insights. Again, guests from all over. We've got Belgium and Texas to Ohio and all over. So thanks for that great message. But yes, we do have some questions. So if you're up for that, coming from Chris, he said, Steve, I love what you said about the power of relationships and transformation versus transactional living. How do you do this in family and parenting your kids?
It's the same. I mean, it's easier in many ways, right? Because you parenting has to be more selfless because you don't get anything back anyway. Half the time you're like, my wife and I look at each other like, I mean, at what point do our kids say and appreciate what we're doing? Like, when Barb had really hard pregnancies. I mean, she was in bed for 4 or 5 months, and it was brutal. And how she did it 4 times, I witnessed it. I can't even describe it to you. But I made a commitment at that moment, like when she was suffering, I was like, I'm going to do every diaper. I'm going to do everything I can to be helpful here. I'm going to do everything. And so in the doing, I now look at my kids, and they have no appreciation for that. The sense that I want something from them for doing every diaper, like it's just. And so in parenting, it's more selfless by nature. And I think I think parenting is a good example of why family and why it's important, because it draws you into a non-transactional experience. Like you can make it transactional, and that's where it starts to rot, I think, in a lot of ways. But in many ways, that's how and I see it now with I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And man, have I had to live my religion to get some insight into what to do. It has been complex. It has been challenging. I'll be honest with you, there is no, how I quarterbacked was, I need to get across the line. You need to come with me. I want you to come with me. So I'm going to do things that incent you to come with me, but we're doing this and we're doing it now. And so there was, at its core, was a compulsion, right? Like, do not give me any baloney. This is happening, right? And so I was very much about that. And so as you parent, my instinct was, hey, we're going this direction. We're doing it now, and this is what we're doing. And have them go, no, I'm going to the sidelines. I'm going to go get a drink of water. I'm going to sit on this is metaphorical. I'm going to sit on the field. We're done. And I'm like, oh no, that's not how it's going down. And so you have this, existential moment when you now realize that they really are now in control of their lives, which is the way it should be. And they might not do it the way you think it should be done. And I've now found that I now need to leave this compulsion. I've taught, I've modeled, I've done everything that I can, and I continue to do. I never stop modeling and teaching, never. But controlling and with compulsion, we know that's not how it works. So it goes back to living your religion. There is no compulsion in the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is no compulsion in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't know how many times you can, but we all want to compel. And gratefully there's no compulsion, because that's how you grow. It's the freedom and the agency. We recognize this as rootedness. This is the rootedness of why, and people ask me, why is there church? Why is there's stuff to get done, and we can do it together. And so anyway, I find, as we all know instinctively, the greatest lessons around compulsion and around living a religion and these 4 qualities that I talked about. I swear every day I think about love unfeigned. I mean, I think about it, like, what is that? And why do I need, how do I do that? And I honestly, long suffering, there's days when I want to, I'll say this just because I think it's a good metaphor for me. I throw up in my mouth. Like, if I have to think about long suffering one more time, I don't want to be long suffering. I want to, but gentle persuasion. These are not qualities in the world that are power words. These are not controlling words or qualities or and so for me, who in many ways we scored touchdowns and won games and did things because this is what we're doing. And I led that. And people say, how do you lead people to go do that? And I'm now, I'll say mid 50s. I refuse to get so close to 60, but anyway, but that I see things really differently. But I still believe I could go back to the NFL and play and be successful with what I know today. There's no place where this isn't true. Even on the football field, even in the moment of exigency and the what we have to get done, and all that is about preparation. I actually, because I'm on Monday Night Football, I get around a lot to see the most successful teams. And honestly, you think I'm nuts, but I will watch a team warm up. I'll see them interact, and I'll say to myself, they have some of those rooted qualities of selflessness, and that's why they're good. I don't care what play they call. I don't care what defense they run. That team is really good because I can see that underneath their relationships is a selflessness that they really do seek the success of other people around them. And you say to yourself, wait a second, you're telling me that the things I just told you about are not just true on Sunday, but they're actually true Ravens versus the Cowboys? Like, then that's when you say this really works.
Yeah, that's cool. I think, I couldn't give a bigger amen to everything you just shared. I think that the message of agency and willingness to be selfless, I think, is huge. I'd love to transition, as you mentioned, being on the field and how to apply this. We have a question from Scott, and he said, in a locker room full of professional athletes, all with different jobs and talents, how do you get everyone moving in the same direction toward the same goal? What difficulties do you run into? I'm sure this never happens.
So the old way was, and that's not true. Because the 49ers and Bill Walsh were he was an enlightened man. He had flaws like we all do, but he was an enlightened man. He was 2 or 3 generations ahead. He recognized that if I saw you, and this comes from the owner as well, if I see you as my partner, if we're in this together, and that my success is your success, the rootedness of what I've been talking about, then what happens is, and then the key element that needs to be added to that is an accountability. And that Bill, and as long as the head coach, in the end, if we lose, in the end, no matter what happened, no matter all the mitigation and all the crazy things that happened out on that field in the last 3 hours, in the end, I'm responsible. I didn't throw the interception. I'm the head coach. I didn't throw the interception. I didn't fumble the ball. But in the end, if everyone in that organization knows that in the end I'm responsible, I recognize that I'm accountable, and that and that rests on me. What that does, it allows accountability to come rushing in for everybody else. And when you talk about, disparity in that locker room, race, religion, language, pay grades, the jobs that you're asked to do are different. I mean, there is no more different group of human beings than 50 guys in a locker room in the NFL. And how do you gather them? If you don't have that as a rootedness, an underpinning of accountability, and a sense of, I do care about your success, I do care about even more than myself, and if you can, kind of articulate that, those 2 qualities as a foundation, then the rest of it, because there's conflicts that come, problems that come, but most of the time you can find your way through them. But when they're not rooted that way, and and people aren't accountable, and there's not a sense that I care about you as much as myself, teams just go into the sink. I mean, they're terrible. And I've been a part of teams like that, not in San Francisco and not at BYU, but I have been a part of teams like that. And they just they rot fast. And so people are like, Steve, tell me some leadership. tell me you've got an organization. Remember Steve Covey? Remember I told him in that conversation, I said, one of the problems is there's too many guys, 50 guys, 11 on a team on the field. 11's too many, and I can't get, no one, they're underinvested. I'm overinvested. They're irresponsible, and I take all the responsibility. Blah 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 blah. He goes, well, Steve, that's because scientifically proven that 7 is the most number of human beings that can be together and work efficiently. It's been proven by science. I remember thinking, well, no wonder Michael Jordan's great. It's only 5, but 7, he goes, and geometrically it gets worse. 8, 9, 10, 11. You get to 11, it's chaos. And I go, of course, now you understand. He goes, but, the Yoda finger, he came up and he goes, but I'll tell you that in doing it with more than, by science, is too many people, more than 7. When you do something as a group with more than 7 and you're successful, that's where the magic is. There's magic in too many people achieving something together. And it really is true. When we won the Super Bowl, I remember one of my favorite moments in all my professional life was after the Super Bowl in the locker room. We always do the Lord's Prayer at the end, beginning and end, and afterwards we're all so excited. The jubilation was incredible. And then we all had to kneel and say the Lord's Prayer. And as I remember looking around as we did that, and there was this feeling like, oh my gosh, we did it. And there was like a connectivity that I never will forget, that all of us had done something super special. And looking at everybody's faces and the complexity of what we just accomplished is really true. Stephen Covey was right. It was magic.
That's cool. I think that's a great way to articulate that. We have a question from class of 2020. Mindy says, hi, Steve. Thank you so much for your words. I really need to hear that. I'm a recent BYU grad of about a year and a half. Do you have any advice for those new into their career field or recent graduates?
Oh man, I was just thinking about that. What a hard time to go into the job market with 25% unemployment, and people think it's going to be a V and it's going to be back to normal in a month or 2 or even 6. I think all of us are really concerned that we don't get back to normal for some time. And so the challenges for new graduates are immense. I can tell you that the softer skills, we have a very, private equity is like the NFL. It's a very highly competitive, tip of the spear kind of place. And I can tell you the people that are successful are the people that are really achievement oriented in their relationships, in how they, in the same kind of way that how do you make people feel? And that's true in your job as you seek jobs. And I think I can only tell you, I sound like a broken record, but it's just so true to me that I just keep laying it on in every situation. Doesn't matter what situation I get. It's like, how can I do that? And your challenges are going to be unique and ones that I honor your efforts in trying to get the job and keep the job. I mean, even in Silicon Slopes right now in Lehigh and all through on the Wasatch Front, I mean, the jobs were just incredible. We've seen whole towns and counties formed over the last 15, 20 years. And it was one of the best job markets in the world. And we'll see. We'll see if we can't kind of get that back. But I think things are going to be super tough for a little while. And but I still think developing that sense of soft, kind of the softer skills of relationship building, awareness of others. I've seen some of the smartest people in our shop here that don't end up being successful because they just don't understand human beings. They understand the science of business. They understand the science of finance better than anyone alive. But because they don't understand the human factor, the human quotient, they can't be successful. And I'm talking about the smartest people I've ever met. And they fail because they don't have the ability to understand human dynamics. And so I would just suggest to any of you that are trying to go find the way through that, you need that expertise. You need that financial wizardry. You need all the, the aspects that make your professional, whatever your professional life is. You need to be an expert. but make sure that you do not forget, or at least learn or lean into it, especially if it's not natural to you, a more ability to understand and influence the human capacity.
Well said. Thank you. And you know, I'll do a quick shout out, as I mentioned earlier, or at least in the comments, that we have all kinds of resources for recent grads and for people doing career searches with the BYU Management Society and BYU Connect. And if you go to BYUMS.byu.edu, you can find some of those resources. Steve, do we have time for one more question?
Sure, of course.
All right. This one came up a couple times. So the question was, you know, we talked about selflessness, and some people are concerned, how do you deal with someone taking advantage of that?
So that's a great question, because, and I think that's, this is not, we don't, how do I say it? I look for any relationship, I look for, sometimes there's tension, and I make a decision. Is it creative tension or is it toxic tension? And if it's toxic, it's abusive and it needs to be left behind. Like, it needs to be, in some ways, healing a relationship is I'm not a part of it, right? And so I recognize that there are places that you should not be. There are things that, you know, that need to be said that can, that aren't necessarily healing at the moment. But in your mind, I think if you think about healing in its long view, and it's, you know, like, how would I do that over the next 50 years? The first 5 years might be to be away from it, you know, but no matter what, I want to heal it, even as difficult as that can be. If that's my mindset, I think you'll end up in the right place, in a safe place. We should never be at risk. We should never put up with abuse. We should never be disrespect. Like, all those things are still true. I think this is more of a overarching direction. Like, again, a boat headed out. Like, I'm going this direction, and there's things that I need to do to be safe and careful. But I am headed this way. If does that make sense? Because people ask me that question, and they'll say, "But what about that horrible? You know, this is not. You know, this is not healthy." Like, I give you a full space for that, full space. But what direction are you headed? And I think that's what I'm really saying.
Yeah, well said. Well, Steve, thank you so much. There are so many wonderful comments coming in the chat. Big thank yous and lots of wonderful feedback and how meaneful this is. And
is there a way to see the chat? I don't see the chat. Oh well.
There should be. It should be under Q&A if you look at the right.
You know, I barely got on here.
We're just glad you're here. We're just glad you're here.
I'll tell you
how great it was
yesterday when we couldn't get on. You know, I'm not like this old man. Like, I don't understand the internet. I was trying to tell him it's not. I'm very capable. I just, you know what it ended up being. Everyone will appreciate this. I was in the Microsoft channel, I was in the chat, and I needed to go out again and reboot the whole thing and start again, because we kept just spinning in the same place. So anyway, that's way too much information, but that's why I take responsibility for not understanding that when things aren't working, reboot.
The power in the shutdown and reboot. I love it. Thanks so much, Stephen. I think that's a perfect, I think it's a perfect lesson for all of us with these changing and ambiguous times that we're all adapting. We got to get creative and we got to adapt. And I think your message was a message of comfort and guidance as we're all navigating. Well, I'll just give so as a final thank you, thanks so much again for being here. And thanks to all of our guests. It's been wonderful to have everyone tune in. And we'll just give a shout out, as I mentioned earlier, we have other upcoming events next week, hearing from career navigation expert Tessa White, as well as on Thursday, a cooking class with celebrity chef Tara Teaspoon. And then the following week, we'll be hearing from Barry Relaford on creating ethical space. So we've got a great lineup. Stay in touch. And Steve, thank you again. And thanks everyone for being here.
Be safe.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.